It is Thursday night, and welcome to Tech Charged, a Turn Down for What podcast live special edition. We've got, as always, from the great rolling flatlands of Kansas, Mr. Martin Meek, whose house I just came from this past week.
Yes, sir.
Great to see you, buddy.
Oh, you too.
We've got Mr. Worldwide, Jace Craft Miller, whose camera looks like it's fixed now. Congratulations.
I figured out what it was. There's a new beta version to show comments on the stage. So if I click this button,
hey,
there's that box back again. So
nice. How weird. And then joining us on this special occasion, we are all lightning all the time. We have Tom, you've got your I Am Suburban. Where's your I Am Lightning? It's supposed to be I Am Lightning there. What happened?
You're right. I need to change this. This is from my last StreamYard experience. I need to update it.
Old habits die hard. 100%. And then we've got Alan Test Calendar, who was actually the first, I think, to get the Lightning before, right? Did you get yours before Brandon? Is that right?
The Flash, yeah. Well, I got the Pro last January, and then I got the Flash in December.
Yeah, man. So we just got the rolling Lightning owners here, and it's the first time I've gotten to talk to Alan or Tom. Obviously, see you guys online all the time. Big fans. Shout out to both of you guys, and thanks for joining us tonight. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So who wants to kick us off here? Jace, you're kind of the Pied Piper that brought us all together. You want to launch this episode?
Yeah, no, awesome. Like, it's so exciting to see more and more people choose Lightning, but also, and we have, I think, multiples of us here now too, right, that have chosen Lightning over and over again. And I think that's really, really something special, when you buy the same vehicle again because you loved it so much for the first time. Maybe you move up, maybe you move down. I think all of us kind of have moved up, I guess. But hey, I just think that's exciting. So I guess we'll start with the most recent. Tom, what are your feelings? How did it go? Tell us all about your experience. What led you to Lightning? I think everybody is dying to hear it.
Yeah. Well, feeling awesome. This is the end of day 2. I picked it up yesterday evening. Honestly, I was looking for Lightning since it was first actually debuted. Even before I got my Model 3, I was looking at Lightnings to get one. In 22, during the chip shortage or anything like that, prices just were super high. So I just wanted to get into an EV. So I got the used Model 3. But beforehand, I was at dealers. I was across town, almost across state lines, looking for Lightnings. And yeah, most recently, probably last fall, I was looking at figuring out what to replace the 3 with, and the Lightning was starting to kind of come back in popularity. I'm like, finally, people are getting it. This is such a good truck. And so with the incentives coming out, the used market looking really good for having like really good quality trucks and good pricing at the same time. Like, were they getting new? I got new, but I was originally looking for used. But
I was going to say, because you originally were looking used sort of within at least pretty recently, right? You were looking at used and you decided to go. What changed up to make you go to new instead of used?
Well, a few things. One, it's super hard to find a used extended range with Pro Power. It's like a unicorn spec anywhere. Lariats came with them pretty well, especially in the 22s.
Yeah.
23s and 24s, it got really complicated. XLT didn't have extended range anymore. Pro Power was usually only found on the higher trims, and there was all kinds of stuff. I wanted a good sound system. And I always liked the Flash. Like, when I heard the Flash was coming out last year, it's 2 years ago now. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, crazy.
And I heard about that. I was like, yes, this is the trim. This is the one to get. And sure enough, 2 years later, I'm into Flash now. It's got everything I wanted. It's got the Pro Power 9.6. I have the B&O sound system. I have the 131 kilowatt hour pack and the 20-inch aero wheels. And
I was going to ask you, so you have a Job 1 Flash. So you do have the 131 kilowatt hour battery, not the new, what is the new one? 123.
I believe so. I'm gonna look back at the window sticker to make sure, but I believe I'm on a job 1, if I recall.
Cool. Awesome.
This was like, there were a few other identical ones like this, so I need to make sure the window sticker matched the one I got. But yeah, it was pretty good. After incentives and employee discount, tax credit, I think I got I want to say around 20-ish off of the MSRP. So it was really good.
Flash, that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Good deal. So that's what kind of pushed me over to new versus used.
Totally. Awesome. Well, what about you, Alan? I know you've been a part of the family for a long time, but what made you jump, really into Lightning? I mean, you might as well tell people, for those that don't know, what drove you to Lightning, and then what drove you to Lightning, not ×2 or Lightning round 2.
Yeah. So I've also been interested in the Lightning for quite a while, like Tom. I first saw it at a county fair here when they first were coming out, and I was super stoked. I saw the price for the Pro back then was like $43,000, and I told him right then and there, listen, if this isn't sold, I'll buy it. And I was super adamant. And they're like, oh, we'll talk to you after the fair or whatever. And lo and behold, it was sold, and I couldn't buy it. And there went a whole roundabout, me trying to buy one, and then dealer markups were insane early on. So kind of put that to the side for a while because I didn't want to pay, I don't know, $65,000 for a Pro standard range back then. So time went by, and I was waiting for the Cybertruck. I had early reservations for that, and I was super excited for it. And as pricing was released for that, I was like, yeah, I can't buy that. That's double my budget. And obviously it's come down since then. But at the time, the Pros were getting out there more and more, and pricing was at MSRP, and you can negotiate a little bit under and such. So I found a great deal on a Pro and absolutely loved it. I really thought I'd just keep that truck for a long time, drive it till the wheels fell off. The range obviously isn't the best, but we had a Tesla and a Model Y at the time, so that was our family vehicle, and this was a great work vehicle. Most of my towing at the time was local, so it was just perfect. All the power and didn't have to worry about range. But then the deals continue to pop up, and I saw this flash. It was the same dealer I bought the Pro at, and they sent me an email, and I was like, oh, that price can't be real. I'll just inquire about it just to see. And lo and behold, it was pretty close to real, and we negotiated, and they gave me I think it was $4,000 less than I paid for the Pro a year later for trade-in towards the Flash. And the whole deal worked out. I walked out before tax with the Flash for $52,000. And what drove me to want it is, one, the more range, more luxurious interior, and then it had the 9.6 Pro Power versus the Pro only had the standard Pro Power. So those were the big drivers, along with, lane keeping, Blue Cruise, the whole tech package of Flash. I was excited about all of those features, especially at a price that was, much more affordable than, 3 years ago.
Out of curiosity, what are your guys' Blue Cruise plans when you bought your truck? If your trial has expired, are you going to, or will soon, are you going to re-up?
I'll speak first since I was just going. I had 3 months free, and that expired, and I have not re-upped yet. It's I think $49 a month, which isn't too crazy, but I haven't had to drive it on highway much lately. I think if we do a trip or something, I would definitely do it. It's really nice to have. But most of my commutes around here in rural Ohio don't have Blue Cruise. Obviously, if we're going further, the main roads, the turnpike, 80-90, which Tom's well familiar with because he drove all of it. That would all be Blue Cruise, but a lot of the stuff I do doesn't. So if they expand it, I might be more tempted. But as of now, it'd be a month-to-month basis based on what's going on.
Definitely.
That's how we are in Kansas here too, Tom. No, I got to get to Tulsa or Kansas City or something before I actually get Blue Cruise roads. So I have a 23, so I still have the year, and then they extended it for us, but I'm not going to renew until I need it. That month-to-month deal is pretty nice to get it when you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we feel about? It's funny because all three of us that recently got them, and Jace differently with the lease, but still all of us got really good deals, and we
Mhm.
looked and we found them, and maybe I had to travel a little bit further than some, but at the end of the day, that was the enticement, right? Because I was also looking used. I was in Arizona and found a used. I was looking all over the place trying to look at a used. And then at the end of the day, this thing pops up new. We talk a lot about the dealer experience and how awful it is to have to go through that. But then you spend a few hours with a dealer, you go back and forth, and at the end of the day, you get 20,000 off or whatever it is, and you're feeling good about it. How do we feel about that? Because to one extent, you can't go over to maybe you could take something from inventory at a Tesla and get a little bit off of it, but you're not really pulling off the kind of deals we're talking about today. Or is the whole problem that we even have to do that at all, and they're just not base stickered at 50 to 70 to begin with instead of 70 to 90 to begin with? Like how do we feel about that? Because we all feel good about our experience. We all feel great. We all feel like we got the W for getting this deal at the right time. But then there's a bunch of other people right now that are rolling their eyes at us and cursing at us and drinking a beer because they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like that. We've talked about this a lot too. I think it's like there's pros and cons to every model, right? There's pros to the dealer model. There's pros to direct consumer. In my opinion, I've been very vocal about this on Twitter. We've saved now, with including the Platinums, we've saved over $50,000 off of MSRP. Probably more, to be honest, when you add up all our vehicles. So for us, that's been huge. But yeah, did I have to spend some time in the dealership to make that happen? Yes. Were there times where we had to go through and listen to the finance guys spiel? Absolutely. Yeah. But I do believe that for us, Ford EV buying has been a little bit different because inventory is much more limited. So when I call a dealer, I'm pretty much looking at a specific truck, which is very different than before, where I was just going and looking at they might have 5 or 6 Lariat F-150 ICE trucks that would maybe fit the bill for us. That's simply not the case. Now I'm calling in on a specific vehicle ready to buy, essentially. So usually the deal happens pretty much that day. So that's been a little bit different, but yeah, pros and cons to each of the models. I mean, I do feel good when, we saved a lot off of MSRP. But, I get that the other flip side of that coin, that not everybody gets that price, right? And that's exciting or not great. But it's tough because they also, for a lot of the cases, they also wanted it first. And I saw people who hit up dealers and said, I have $150,000 to buy a Lightning today. Who's going to sell it to me? And that's hard to, tell a dealer, no, don't go for that. I mean, they'd be goofy not to. And I saw it more often than I ever thought I would see. But people just wanted the truck and they wanted it now, and they were willing to pay whatever it took to be the first in the neighborhood to get it. So, that's there. And I know there's some that people that got screwed, and that's unfortunate. I know there were some people that ordered and the dealer put a markup on it anyway. And that's super frustrating. That stuff shouldn't happen. Yeah, that stuff shouldn't happen. And I will say, in those cases, I did see Ford try to step in. They're pretty limited as what they can do, but a lot of the times I saw them come to some sort of a resolution. But yeah, it's unfortunate that kind of happened. But in the flip side of the coin, now I haven't seen a markup on an F-150 Lightning and I couldn't tell you how long, so we're now
they really can't now. I mean, California, it's hard to get a discount. I'll tell you that. That's why I had to leave the state. I went to a couple different dealers that I know, and they weren't offering any kind of deals or discounts. It was whatever, the employee pricing was it. That's all they were doing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I was looking outside of it to begin with. But I mean, at the end of the day, I was a story similar to Alan. I wanted the $40,000 Pro. I had ordered the Cybertruck, the single motor spec at $40K. The Pro came out first, but then by the time it came California's time to order, all you guys on the East Coast took up all the XLTs and Pros. And by the time it came out here, it was kind of like what you said, Jace. It was like, well, I either pay because I want to have the first round out and I got to pay for the Lariat standard range, which is all I could afford. Even that was a stretch. And the only reason I got that is because my minivan got such a huge, everything was inflated. You know, an 8-year-old minivan got $20,000 in trade-in. So that's the only reason the math worked on mine. But I paid the same for my Platinum as I did for that standard Lariat.
Which is, we did the same,
which is-
almost exactly.
you know what I mean?
Same as our standard range Lariat, which is after the tax credit actually on the standard range Lariat. It is pretty crazy. But but you brought up a good point though, because you mentioned Tesla and the Cybertruck, and that's a particular, you know, another layer onto the situation. Same with, you know, Silverado EV and these others. Lightning wasn't the only one that went through these price hikes, right? You know, we saw, you know, Lightning did launch, I guess, a few Pros at the original price.
They at least did sell some.
They were there. But, you know, we saw that Cybertruck, you know, just nothing, you know, close to what they said with range and price. And then that got there with Lightning too, after, you know, a while too. So, you know, it's
the $40,000 Lightning and the $35,000 Model 3 are the two unicorns of the EV world. If you were one of the lucky ones that got them, you know, like, kudos to you. You know,
but it's sort of Tesla's way of, in my opinion, sort of a dealer markup, right? It's not exactly that, but with the Foundation series, especially, you know, you had the $20,000 markup added on top of the markup that was already added too. So you kind of see it.
Why? What's their launch
the
edition?
launch edition.
Yeah, I guess that's their version of a markup, right? The Foundation series, the launch edition, that's their version of the dealer markup, you know, but they do give you something for it. They're throwing in the extras.
True.
You know,
absolutely.
Like, Tom, what was your feeling going into that dealer experience, and how was it for you compared to, you know, what you're used to with like what we all know from Rivian and Tesla and those guys, where it's, you know, exactly what you're getting, and you walk in, you walk out, you press a button on an app.
Yeah, and it's funny. I did similar approach to Jace. Like, I came for that exact truck. I look on the sites, and I did this, you know, several times, several dealers. I want this Flash with Pro Power. I want you to show me this one and give me a price for this. And, you know, sometimes it'll be like they'll try to upsell me to a Lariat, or they'll try to get me to even a Platinum. I'm like, nope, I just want the Flash. And, you know, that part is, I get it. They need to make their, you know, their incentives from selling, things like that. The other part I noticed big time was I've been spoiled from direct to consumer from the paperwork standpoint. You know, everything is signed, you know, electronically. You can do it on your phone and your computer within like a couple minutes, and you're all done. Here, you're like, I sat at the dealership for, I believe, 6 hours before everything was said and done. And even after that, it was I did the paperwork Saturdays, and I picked it up yesterday. So Saturday, got everything done. They couldn't file the tax credit because the offices for the IRS were closed. So they couldn't even do that. So I had to wait till Monday, and Monday became Tuesday, and Tuesday became Wednesday. And finally, Wednesday is when I got the truck. And part of it's dealership's fault, or not really dealership's fault. Part of it's more of the tax credit, kind of the confusion on that, because it is kind of a hard thing to do versus other dealers or manufacturers. Tesla just does it right there. It's part of the paperwork. Their system's already done it pretty much. They just take it off. Where dealerships, who are also not usually trained on EVs, are trying to figure out, like, what's this tax credit? How do we file it? Things like that. Every time I go to a dealership, I'm pretty much teaching them about the Lightning. I'm like, hey, did you guys know about this? And they're like, whoa, no, I'm gonna remember that. But yeah, it was definitely an exhausting experience. I'm happy that I got the deal I wanted, but, you know, compared to the direct to consumer, it's definitely a task. Like, come with snacks or something. Thankfully,
I made you work for it.
Yeah, I had breakfast with me, so I was good. I was in there for the long haul.
And I think that's what we see. I think that's probably the biggest complaint that people have, is that it's not consistent across dealers, right? Like, and we saw that particularly when we bought leased our latest two Lightnings. The dealer we worked with for my Lightning was amazing. Everything was through text. I had quotes, you know, without a credit check. You know, things were great. You know, we spent, I think we came into the dealership a total of, like, we spent literally an hour and maybe 10 minutes in the dealer. It was great. Justin's truck, not so great. The first dealer, we signed the paperwork with an iPad, and it was awesome. Like, I've never signed all of the paperwork on, it was actually a Surface, But I've never signed all of the paperwork on a digital, thing before. And I thought that was really nice. And it really sped up the process. But then the second, truck was nothing like that. Obviously a different dealer, but a totally different experience and much more time spent. Still not 6 hours. That's a lot. But, I think we were at 2.5, 3. And, when the dealer's 45 minutes away, especially, it just adds up. All that time adds up, and time is money. So, yeah, I don't blame you at all.
So, Alan, you've been through now Tesla, Ford twice, and Volkswagen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm missing one, but can you compare those three? How do the Germans do it compared to the Americans? And then, of course, we know Tesla.
That's a great question. So, yeah, starting with Tesla, I think most people probably know that process. It's pretty streamlined, and they really do a great job. You kind of show up, sign a couple papers. I think I was there for 10 minutes, the last Tesla we bought, and you're out of there. And we even had a trade-in, and I was like, you're not even going to look at it or anything? They're like, nope, bye. I was like, okay. So then the Ford, the first one that we bought, we went up and we test drove, and I said, listen, I'm not buying it today. We're just looking, whatever. And they sat us down and kind of did the dealer thing a little bit, but they weren't too pushy or whatever. I know Jace has made comments before. You definitely can't expect them to teach you anything about the Lightning. So that was, I came in back then a year and a half ago, pretty knowledgeable, but I didn't know everything. So I was like, oh, maybe you can teach me some things. No. But then when we decided to purchase it, this dealer does most things virtually. You can sign online, and then they deliver it for free, which was super cool. Then you sign some papers. But both Lightnings we bought, so like I said, same dealer, delivery, and everything. The paperwork process, they either forget something or I didn't sign something that they told me or didn't tell me to sign, or again, they forgot a piece of paperwork. And I think both times it had 3 or 4 rounds of phone calls. Hey, will you sign this? We're going to FedEx it to you, or will you sign it online? It's like, I can do that. A little bit of a hassle, but again, back to your original comment, I was saving a ton of money. So it was a little annoying, but it was also saving tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, I'll do this.
Do you think the paperwork was due to being out of state, or do you think it was dealer incompetence, or both, just out of sheer curiosity?
Probably both. Some of the stuff was pretty obvious, and some of it, I don't know. I don't know all the paperwork details because obviously I'm not a dealer, but
yeah, sure.
Some of it was like the guy that delivered it didn't tell me to sign on this line, and we're flying through it. It's not like he's trying to hang out and sign papers. And he missed it. And some of it, yeah, it might've been, there was an out of state form we have to do to get your trade in. Cause I think, both times I traded in a vehicle. So there was maybe a little out of state stuff there, but at the same time, they're a huge dealer. They deliver all over the country.
Especially if they offer free delivery. Yeah.
They should know. But that's, again, it was okay. A little bit of a hassle. And then Volkswagen. So we traded in our Y for the VW-ID Buzz. And that was a pretty streamlined. They spent, 20 or 30 minutes checking out the Model Y. Everything checked out. They didn't balk at anything. Signed the final paperwork, and we were out of there. Probably a 45-minute process.
Wow.
But in advance, I had been looking for buzzes all over the country. And it just kind of had worked out that the best deal in the country was 45 minutes from our house. So I was willing to drive to Florida, New York. I called everywhere. And that was the best deal with trade-in taking into account as well. So that was cool. We could line everything up. I knew, again, exactly what vehicle I was buying. And we were ready to go. So I don't know how any of those would go if I showed up and looked and then said, hey, I want to take this home. But that's not typically how I shop. I'm usually pretty pointed at that point.
And the paperwork for me got a little sideways because I was trying to
ask Chris. I was very curious.
I was trying to be proactive. So I sent them a cashier's check via FedEx. Shout out twice to FedEx now in this conversation. I love it. And so, yeah, I was like, I'm being smart. I'm going to send them everything in advance. I got, everything situated. Well, then when I get there and I sign everything, then they realize, all the paperwork that was done when I sent the cashier's check was dated 2 days previous to my pickup date. So all of that paperwork had to be redone because some of it said, the 14th and the rest said the 16th or was something like that. And then somewhere on one of the forms, my legal name is Christopher. Somebody had put Chris, and So my driver's license and all that stuff. And when I had done it, I had put Christopher, but on their paperwork that they had filled out, they had put Chris. So all that had to be redone. And it was, and unfortunately, God bless the finance guy. I was like, hey man, I got 15 hours. I've got to be in Kansas by the end of the night. Can we skip the whole extended warranty conversation?
FYI,
and
it was not the end of the night.
it was literally the next
4 o'clock
morning.
the next morning.
I got caught up with the EV Geeks and Franklin charging, man. I got a little distracted,
That's fun though.
It was well worth it. But yeah, I was trying to guilt the guy, and he did. To his credit, he was like, okay, well, I understand this isn't going anywhere, but he did try to, it's his job. I get it. And so yeah, there was just some fun times there. And then, I guess the smartest among us is Martin, who he doesn't pay MSRP or even discounted MSRP. He just rebuilds them himself.
I don't know about smart, but my dealer experience is click the button and then it ships to my house. I don't have to do anything. I tell the bank to wire the money. Being in the wrecked world, and I have for 30 years, I despise everything you guys just said. The dealer process for me, I can't stand it. And I support the fact that we have dealers. That's how these trucks get out there initially, right? But there's probably people out there that just like to walk in and hand them cash or hand them a check. They hand them the keys. We'll mail you the title and you're out the door. And that Tesla, I think, kind of figured it out somewhat. But the last time I bought a car from a dealer, it was like 4 hours in the dealership and we knew what we wanted. We were ready to buy. Walk in. So they want to say on this, they want to say on this, and then they got to take a test drive, and then they got to look at your trade. And then we decided not to trade. And I can't handle all that. And it starts off with me pulling into the dealership and the guys on the golf cart next trying to shove a business card through my window. I'm like, wait a minute. I haven't gotten out of the car yet. And I drive off. I can't handle that. So yeah, it's a different
curiosity. Out of curiosity, oh gosh, I was just going to ask a question and I forgot. What did you just say, Martin? You said something.
Just the dealer. Well, the dealers, just the whole dealer process. I can't handle, sitting there for 4 hours and, that I want to be left alone. But when I'm ready for questions, I need somebody who's knowledgeable. So our first experience was I think it was right in like January of 23. So the trucks have been out for a minute. There was a red extended range Lariat 45 minutes from my house, like Alan mentioned. And it was on my anniversary. And so I told my wife, I said, we just want to stop and look. We're just going to look. And she agreed hesitantly. And the guy walks up. I'm in a Super Duty. That's what I was driving at that point. And the guy walks up. His first words out of his mouth are, these trucks can't tow. Are you wanting to tow? And I'm done with you. You can go back inside. And I just told him, I said, who told you that? Because that's absolutely wrong. Oh, well, they'll overheat. And I'm like, no. So yeah, that dealer experience for me, and it's just a guy, he just didn't know. I mean, they have no training. They are trying to sell 18 F-150s and they might have somebody look at that Lightning kind of situation. So they don't really want to do the training to sell one of 18 trucks. They know mostly about the F-150s and the stuff they're selling if you get a good salesperson, but a lot of them really don't. So
yeah,
that's kind of that situation.
Comment here from Derek says saying, why not just list the actual price? The dealers are a large part of why, he went Tesla. And I think that's a story for so many people that it's so transparent.
The price is sort of, not set in stone.
Though.
I think that's kind of why. Yeah.
Tesla, maybe it's a generational difference. I am not going to pull into a dealer and pay what they ask for it. I was raised that way. My dad always taught me to negotiate. Heaven helping, my dad will negotiate at Walmart, and he's just built that way. But I want to pull in. If you're asking $69,000 for this truck, if I can't buy it for 65 or 6, we're not doing business. So I kind of like that they inflate it to give me that, hey, I got $4,000 off feeling. I don't know that everybody's that way now.
A whole nother piece is too, you can negotiate your trade where, Tesla and Rivian, what you get is what you get. And I mean, we didn't end up going that direction, but I think we brought the dealer up. It was either 3 or 4K on Justin's trade-in. Like I said, it still didn't match Carvana. And so we ended up going that direction. But I mean, you can definitely make a big swing there for sure.
It was interesting as I was doing my search because I ran into so many different varied learning experiences. So in one case, I'd see a great price and it was out of Washington and I'd call about it. But it turned out you could only get that price if you were a military veteran public school teacher living in this county making under 80K. And I'm like, well, I'm none of that. Okay, well, that price doesn't apply to you. And then, obviously I knew better than to look at Colorado prices, because I've learned from Out of Spec that those are all built in with very special incentives. So I scratched them right off the board. And then you would see other prices that were inflated, but you knew they would negotiate, but then you had to do that whole dance. And then I just kind of looked for the ones that at least were transparent about, here's MSRP, here's our price. And then there's the other dance that with Ford, at least, I don't know if Volkswagen had anything like this, Alan, but with Ford, there was still, even with the discount, some room, because I left some financing. I let them give me the special finance rate because the dealer made money from Ford if they sold the Ford financing. So they make money in multiple ways. They can play with your trade-in value. They can play with how much you're getting off. Like, they also waived, with new vehicles, there's that $2,000 destination charge that's on there too. Like, they waived the destination charge. So there was like another $2,000 that I didn't have to pay. But because I did the financing, they got incentivized by the financing side of it. So they have so many different levers to pull, versus my first experience. I've never personally experienced the Tesla thing, but I was, when Will F the Pump got his Cybertruck, and I was there for that. I literally recorded the entire experience, and it was 90 seconds. He had his app out. He clicked a button. This little celebratory thing appears on the screen of like confetti. And we walked out to his Cybertruck, and we were having lunch like 45 minutes later. It was crazy. It's so different, but they didn't have any of those levers.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to ask you guys, because it kind of goes right into all of this. Did you or did you not test drive your vehicle before you bought it?
Mine's quick. No.
I didn't. No, my first test drive was me driving it heading to Arkansas.
I figured that might be the case. And for you, Alan, it was delivered. So your test drive was at home, right?
Well, the Pro we test drove when we went up there, but the Flash, yeah, we never touched it. But you kind of know once they're a little different, because it's a little heavier with the bigger pack. But I didn't need to.
Yep, I test drove mine. Well, technically a different one. I test drove a couple different ones to make sure I wanted the right spec, like exactly, just in case if the one I want has a wheel wobble or something happening. I just want to make sure that VIN is good.
Well, so that brings me the question. That's a good point, Tom. And I was going to ask you guys, Tom, you can jump in, or whoever first. We've talked about this a lot of times on the show, is like, you've got to just get in the seat of a Lightning. It's kind of overlooked by Cybertruck, Rivian, even the guys that are going to Chevy now, which I like the GMC Sierra EV. It's just pricey. Yeah. But what is it that made you guys, like, maybe what about the last vehicle you were coming from that made you go back to Lightning? What is it about the truck? Because everybody wants it. I try to explain to people, they think it's just an F-150 that has electric power, and it might as well be a different truck because it feels completely different. So what's your guys' take on that?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I mean, for my biggest like about this truck is that it looks traditional. It's the most normal looking EV truck. I'm kind of a funny kind of car guy, where I love new technology, but also hate when stuff like changes drastically. Many of you know me as a heavy GM guy. I'm a Chevy Suburban account on Twitter. And when the Chevy Silverado EV came out, I'm like, what is this? Where's the Silverado? I mean,
Avalanche.
It looks like,
Avalanche.
Yeah,
I think we all know it's the Avalanche.
I call the Avalanche every time. And like, because I'm a GM purist, if they just named it Avalanche, I probably would have bought it. Who knows? But like, the Lightning is just it's a proven truck, a proven chassis, proven cab, proven bed. Everything is, they need to go experience something new. And so I was familiar with that. I was familiar with the build quality, the capabilities of it. And I mean, I've always wanted a truck for a while, and I love the, aspect of the power outputs. My Rivian R1S does not have, it has a larger battery pack than this, but cannot do higher than 110 output. So no vehicle to vehicle, no vehicle to home. This can do it, and that's one of my biggest selling points for it as well. I want to power a camper, I want to power my house.
And Tom, is that what you're coming from? Is a Rivian R1S?
I still have the R1S. This replaced my Model 3. So before the Model 3, I wanted to get the Lightning, but similar to what Alan was
that's quite a
saying,
change.
Pros were going for like $80K. It was wild.
Yeah.
But I want one even for the Tesla. The Tesla is basically just a placeholder.
So touch on
Quite a
that though,
difference.
because you on one part of your driveway was a Rivian, on one side was a Tesla. These are really as good as it gets when it comes to the user experience, the no laggy software, the OTAs. Or educate me. Yeah, I mean, I always hear about the Ford software is notoriously laggy. The OTAs are spotty and not nearly as impressive sometimes as some of the OTAs from those, Rivian and Tesla.
I would say they're just more seamless. I have a lot of experience updating Fords and
Martin,
they're just seamless.
Here's the thing about Martin. Martin, you're not normal. Okay, you have a garage in your garage. You have a lift. You have FDRS. You have the cables. If my fender was dented, I saw a fender hanging on your wall. Like there is a parted out Tesla in one corner and right. I mean, that's different. I can't.
It is, but still, I still get the same OTAs, and I still deal with user experience just like you guys. I mean, we have a 30,000-mile Model S that we just built that we're driving now, and the seamless experience for an OTA for those is it tells you it's going to download. It downloads and asks you, "Can you install it now, please?" And you hit yes. It's kind of the same way with Lightning now, except for all these growing pains of the OTAs of failing batteries, and when it works properly, I'm going to say it's just as seamless. The problem is it's not as seamless consistently.
Yeah, and I would say the difference between for the end user in an inhibit update and a non-inhibit update, end user, that's confusing. Like it's inherently confusing. They don't know the difference. They don't want to know the difference. I mean, I understand in the sense that some updates are drivable, some are not, but in the sense of how they download, which is the way that Ford does it with the set schedules. And that's just confusing to people. I've seen people who are like, oh, well, I have auto updates on, but I don't have a set schedule. And Ford has been like, well, you should really set that schedule in addition to auto updates on, because you'll get the updates a little bit quicker. And it's just confusing for the end user. So I agree. But I do think they have fixed a lot of the issues. Yeah. Like you said, the batteries, the 12-volt batteries, was a nightmare. I'm sure it was a nightmare for Ford. And on top of not only draining 12-volt batteries, they had the BMFs that was misreporting what the battery was at. So they had multiple kind of layers going on. And I think it held a lot of things back for a while. I will say on this topic, though, one thing that I will give Ford credit for a little bit, at least compared to the other legacy OEMs, is ForScan. Having ForScan is really cool tool that not every OEM kind of offers, especially for their latest updates. I think that's really cool too, that tool that Ford at least has. I shouldn't say has, but allows.
You mean FDRS?
Both of them, really, both of them.
ForScan, just so we clear here, that is not associated with Ford in any way. It's actually a Russian
right.
program.
That's why I said allows instead. Yeah, they allow it. They don't. It's not Ford, but they are allowing it to happen, which GM would not allow that to happen. There's other OEMs that would not allow.
You can't connect ForScan to a GM and update your Suburban, Tom. You can't like hook it up with hidden
ForScan
features.
is for Ford and Lincoln vehicles only.
I did not realize that.
And like Martin said, it's not Ford, but Ford allows it to happen, which I think is really cool. They don't have to do that, and they do it. And so you can kind of get crazy if you really want to. There's sort of some.
Is there any equivalent?
Is interesting because you can actually back end load firmware updates that come from Ford through ForScan through the USB software. That's how I put the charge speed on my 23. So I have the charge speed on my 23 dash now.
Which that's the crazy part, because they allow it, but it's not supported necessarily by them, but it is their updates. So
it's all from Ford. Anything you do in ForScan that allows you to do things, you're doing it because Ford has it there. It's allowable. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's customizable. So that I will say is pretty cool. Obviously, you have to jump on there and know it and have experience with software. Or you should and know that things can get messed up. But it is. I do want to give Ford credit for that because I think it's really cool. And if you, especially on like the ICE F-150s groups, there are guys that go crazy with it, like Martin. You can do some cool stuff.
I've done 20 or 30 updates with mine on different little things, you know, brightness of the LED and how long does the heated steering wheel temperature can be changed. All those things are things that you can change in that software. And I've went crazy with it, but you don't have to. I think that the biggest frustration is, you know, Jim posted a comment here, how fragmented the fleet is. Some vehicles get OTA updates regularly, others don't. And you can have the same, almost the same spec truck that your neighbor will be getting updates. And you're like, well, I have a Lariat too. Why isn't mine? Well, it might be that yours is a different firmware build from a different era. You know, 22s.
They go by, they do model year in model year within model year. So job 1, job 2, there could be there's even like 2.5s I've seen. So there is a lot again. And the unfortunately, the end user doesn't really care about this, right? They just want their updates. So it's frustrating for people who aren't maybe even tech savvy or just don't understand how the process works, because all the OTAs do come in waves, and you kind of see, and Ford's gotten good at it and not so good. There's been things where I've seen where they've made some good decisions where they like rolled it out to 22s first, but there's also been some weird things where, you know, it hasn't gotten rolled out properly, or maybe 24's got something before, you know, so
Greg's comment here is something I want to touch on, because he talks about, hey, I wish I lived next to Martin to get his help. You know, Ford OTAs, I'm still waiting since September for an OTA. Martin and I talked about this when I was looking at used. Like he was going to come out. He's still going to come out and bring FDRDS and Forescan, even for my 25, because there's some Forescan stuff that the Matrix headlights and stuff. And so there was, you know, when I was with Kyle, that was a big thing from Kyle. Like, man, I'm not going to pay that for a Lightning. I'd like to get, you know, a lower cost Lightning, but I'm worried about the software gap. I think we all wish we lived next to Martin, because then that would, you know, there's some of his rebuilds that I wouldn't feel bad about getting if I was living close enough to him, that if I had a battery problem, I could bring it back to Martin. If I had an old 2022, 23, I could bring it to Martin to update. Like how much of that for you, Tom and Alan, factored into whether or not to buy used versus not to buy used, the software, or was that a non-factor? And like, I don't know who wants to start on that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, because especially when you both have experience with Tesla, you know that, you know, a 2019 Tesla and a 2025 Tesla are largely going to get the same thing at the same time, unless you're in, you know.
Sort of within reason, but yes, as we've seen with the different chips and stuff, though. I mean, we're starting to see that as well. So it's but I agree.
Talk about that, guys. Like, chime in, and how was that into a factor in terms of the new versus used coming from Tesla, Rivian? What was that like?
Yeah, like Jay said, the Teslas are differentiating a lot by year, more and more as it goes. Some of the older ones aren't nearly as capable as the newer ones, and that's reality is only going to get worse. I mean, if you own a 2012 Model S, I'm sure that's worlds difference than the newer ones. But when I was shopping, there wasn't really any good deals for used ones yet. Those are really kind of a newer thing. You know, obviously we talked about Brandon Flash getting a great deal, and I'm sure others have as well, but that's a newer thing. So that really, I don't think was an option for me, at least not like a huge savings. But as you mentioned with the whole dealer network, living in rural Ohio, I don't feel super confident about any of the dealers around me that could service it if something did go wrong. I know, Chris, you brought it to the dealer back and forth. I'd have to call around to see who I could even take it to, because some of these dealers, they want nothing to do with EVs. But the good side of that is there's a ton. Every town you go to, there's a Ford dealer. If this one doesn't, go to the next. So that wouldn't be like fun. But I'm sure I could find one closer, because the nearest Tesla dealer to me, or store, or service center, is over an hour and a half away. They closed the closest one, which was still an hour away. So, you know, you kind of have to weigh all of that. But I think
3,000 dealers versus 180. You know, I mean, there's again so many pros and cons to it. Like, there's bound to be 180 good Ford EV dealers. I would hope, out of 3,000. I would really hope.
I would hope, and they still have support of the larger Ford. You know, even if these little ones decided to take me in, they would have the larger support, and they have adequate technicians. They may not know the electric truck that well, but any good troubleshooting can work through most of these issues.
Luckily, the Lightnings don't have many problems. I hate to say that, because
exactly.
I've gotten good at it, but there's not a lot. Probably.
That's great.
For 80-some thousand trucks, Chris and a few of the guys had lemons.
Yeah, I know I haven't put nearly as many miles as some guys, but I'm going on almost 20,000 miles and I've done nothing, which I could say the same for the Teslas I bought new.
Yeah.
But that's the point of electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
I went from a gas truck that needed, every time I fixed it, the light would come back on and I would need to put something else in it, and it was older. But I was just done with that. And I mean, that's what got me into an electric truck was good used gas trucks were still 30 grand with 100,000 miles on it.
Yep.
COVID time frame. Well, post COVID and whatever, or I could spend low 40s and get a brand new electric truck that wouldn't need work. It was really a no brainer.
So Alan, circling back around a little bit, what did you come out of for the Lightning? What was your switch and why?
I had a 08 Silverado. I was born and raised the GM guy. I still, I don't know, a lot's changed since then, but had the Silverados for a long time, ever since I was 16 and could drive. And yeah, the Y obviously was mostly price driven. I really didn't want to buy a Ford, but they've definitely won me over because it's an amazing truck. Yeah. Now,
did you even consider a 4WT or anything along those lines?
They weren't out yet.
Okay.
And they just came out, and MSRPs of those 4WTs are 80 grand. You can get them a lot cheaper, but when those first came out, that's what you were paying. So now I think you can get a 4WT in like the 60s. That's still significantly more than I paid for my Flash. So
right.
Now, Tom, you just did a video today about the Silverado off-road spec. What's that spec that they're calling it now?
Trail Boss.
Trail Boss, right?
Yep.
So when you compare the Rivian and the Tesla and the advanced software, and then you look at the Trail Boss that you just saw, and then you think about your Lightning, like compare and contrast, like what's the value driver for you that's got you sitting in the Flash right now, especially when or maybe you don't feel this way, but do you feel like you have to compromise on the software side, but you're gaining X and Y? Like, walk me through that, because you've got so much experience with trucks in general. Like what was that thought process for you when you're coming from two of the most technological examples, and then you're seeing what the future is with Trail Boss, but this is the truck that you want to be in?
Yeah, and it's funny because like when we were talking about how reliable and responsive the different OEM softwares are, Rivian Gen 2 is, at least for mine, very, very laggy. So and funnily enough, every time I test drive a Lightning, I've been test driving every few months since 2023. Well, kind of before, but in 23 I test drove my first Lariat, and it had the vertical screen before I was only doing pros, and the vertical screen for some reason was more laggy than the typical horizontal, probably just because it's the same system running a larger UI. This one has been this is the most responsive vertical screen I've ever used. Like the 25 is really good, faster than the Rivian. Of course, it's faster than Tesla. My Tesla's a 2019. Like you were saying earlier, it has the old Intel Atom chip. I had posted a video a few months ago where the screen was literally frozen while I was driving. I couldn't see speed, couldn't see lights or anything like that. Music was cutting out. And this is probably the most responsive I had so far.
I've noticed that in my R24s, that the responsiveness in general, and not really just not like CarPlay or anything like that, but just like going through system menus, opening maybe like the phone list or something like that, is almost instantaneous compared to just a tad bit of lag on our 22s, just overall lag. And there's a couple places now where it still lags a little bit, but I've noticed it seems much more snappier in general. And I don't know of any true hardware changes that they made. So
there's not. And I got to tell you, that is exactly my experience coming from a 22 that was updated to the 24, 25 software. Now I have a 23 that has the 25 software, and it is lagless. There is really not anything on there that you get that says, hey, this is different software, this is different hardware, right? There's nothing that's telling you this truck feels different. It's as far as hardware goes, it's all software. And like, I don't know, in the early days, if you guys remember when you would be switching between Android Auto and some other screen, you'd get this loud buzzing sound coming through the speakers, or something would lag. They've seemed to have fixed that through software. Even the charging, Now, since I have the charge speed, when you plug it in, the user interface seems to be much faster. It reacts faster. You know, I will see charge speeds on the dash within seconds now. And for some reason, that's a delay always on the charger side. I'll pull into some Electrify Americas or others, and it'll take up to 2 minutes before I see anything. And if I have it started on my phone app at a Tesla station, we're talking 10 seconds and I'm seeing 180 kilowatts on the screen. So I think that's all software driven.
Yeah. I do want to make one comment on the whole software situation. You know, when I first got Teslas, I was all excited about it. You know, you can play video games, you can do this, that, and the other, which is awesome. But I do want to say 98% of the general public, they just want to drive their vehicles. And that's where I'm at with the truck. I came from a Silverado that had a stereo and that was it. And this has, you know, way, way, way more bells and whistles. I need it to haul. I need it to tow. I need it to get from A to B. And I don't care that it can do this, that, or the other. I have a phone that can do a lot of things and other devices. And so, you know, us EV nerds get all wrapped up in software and the UI and how snappy it is. But for the general public, they just want the thing to go. And I know we talk about it over and over again, and I do too. It is important, but it's way less important than most of us on X or wherever else think.
Yeah, and I would say the older I get, the less crap I want to deal with. You know, like I used to be beta software on my iPhone, beta everything. Like I didn't care if, you know, I remember one time Apple released a beta update to my phone and it cut service to all the iPhones and I had no service to drive home. And I thought, oh, like at 2 a.m. from the bar, you know, after bartending. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. You know, like I'm on the latest. If that happened to me now, I would be so mad that, you know, I couldn't call somebody and tell them that I'm on my partner, that I'm on my way home. You know, the older I get, the less of that stuff I want to deal with.
Yeah, and those are updates that, you know, I agree. Like I spent all weekend last weekend updating a 2020 Lincoln Aviator using FDRS. And the things that I was geeking out about that they were showing in the software, some of the updates, the guy sitting next to him, he's 56 years old, his wife's car. He couldn't care less about any of that. He's like, stop the screen from lagging out when we're trying to turn on the air conditioner. He said, I hate that the air conditioner is in the screen, you know, and it's not on all of them, but this particular one. And I'm like, you don't care about any of this. I said, what do you use the screen for? He said, nothing. I mean, do you use navigation? They don't even care about Android Auto or CarPlay. He said, that's my wife's job, holding her phone in the passenger seat. They don't care about these things.
I you know, shout out to Matt there, who's had his comment about, I think that's part of it too. He just wants his Mach-E to show the charging speed. You know, I think if they would prioritize some of these low-hanging fruit updates that are,
you know,
the creature comforts.
Chargers worked like they're supposed to. When you pull into a gas pump, they flow about the same rate at all gas pumps, right? You know, you're going to be there 5 to 7 minutes roughly. But the chargers, we have a Mach-E that's the same way. I have no idea if it's putting 50 kilowatts in or 200. All you know is you can, every little bit, you get that little bit of bleep where it's going across. Like you don't know. And on the Lightning, it's so much better to be able to see that number, go to 180 to begin with, and then you know you can go inside or go to the restaurant or go wherever you're going to go on a trip. Because I talked to some guys the other day that they don't even care what it charges at because they don't charge their truck on the road enough to even care. I mean, they know it's going to be a pain. They don't really want to deal with it, but the 2 times a year they're going to drive it on a trip, they'll just plug it in and whatever it takes is whatever it takes.
I'll tell you something that was curious to me when it comes to charging. For forever, I have criticized Electrify America, and I still will.
Literally forever. I can vouch for that.
But Electrify America charged better on my trip across the country than the Tesla superchargers did.
So did mine
recently too. I know, and I don't want to say that. I would have never said that a year ago. Like
no,
but
no
way.
Because they were derated and all these things were happening. We just not had consistency. But you're right. I've noticed that. I went on a couple 2,000-mile trips lately to Iowa and to New Orleans from Kansas. EA outperformed Tesla every single time on speed. And as that taper down went, I was tapering down
just
between 110 and 120. Yeah, not on price. That's why I use Tesla, because that extra 5 or 10 minutes or 5 minutes even, you get 32 to 37 cents a kilowatt hour here in the Midwest. We're 45 to 39 on EA.
I was going out of my way trying to experience different charging, not just Tesla. And so I hit up an Iona for the first time. I hit up Franklin's for the first time. I was able to try these different chargers, and I'm almost curious if it's worse for the extended range than the standard range. And my thought on this,
What were the issues that you were running into, Chris? Like derating?
derating, yeah. And so what would happen in my standard range, I would constantly say that, man, I love Tesla because it would, on the standard range, I would only get a max of 177 is the most that I ever saw. And typically it was a little bit less than that. It was closer to 170, and they would hold like a 120 for a good long time, like a solid 120, just flat all the way to 80.
Yep.
And on this trip, I was hitting 105 a lot. Like I was going down, I would get that boost right up to 180 something. I never hit 190, which I know some people have had, so I know it's capable of 190. But I was sitting in the 180s consistently, 187, something like that, right? 188. But then when it would derate or when it would drop all the way to 105 and hold 105 for a long time. And
it's funny you mentioned that, Chris, because that happened on my trip to New Orleans. We had a middle of nowhere Alabama stop, and I was there in 105, and it dropped as low as 98. And
so
then on the way back, we hit the same spot, and I hit 130. Same exact spot a week later. Like,
but
what's
the EAs and the Alpatronic 400, those things were holding strong, like up in the 120, 130s. And that's the first time for me that I had ever experienced the Tesla. And I wonder if it isn't necessarily great that it hits that 500 amp peak in the extended range.
I think a couple things. Yeah, I think a couple things could, first of all, you add an adapter, you're adding a layer of complexity. You're adding another layer to it. I don't think the adapter should slow anything down, but you never know what could happen.
Yeah, that's
Two, you're adding, it's a fragmentation. You're charging a Ford on a Tesla network. People said for years, well, Teslas, they charge amazing on the Tesla network. Well, they should. They own them, right? But EA had to charge everybody and figure out how to do it. I remember when the Mach-E first launched and there were some issues, and Kyle Connor was out there and Mach-E Vlog and all these people were out there, and myself, honestly, too, once March hit. And we were trying to make sure that, especially with EA, because they were one of the bigger providers, that weren't Tesla. Obviously, we didn't have access to that at the time, that, the charging was working. Ford started a Charge Angels program where they took Mach-E's and tested, various chargers. And there were definitely issues. But yeah, it is kind of funny how it has flipped. But I really believe a lot of that comes in with the fragmentation, and that you've got to charge every single brand and every single nameplate of EV that brand now makes. And that's harder than it was before.
At the end of the day, after you get past the novelty, Chris trying to stop at all these fancy chargers for the novelty side of it. And I get it. I did that too. For me, this next trip that we're taking in a month is 4,500 miles at least through California and back. I'm going to hit every single Tesla station I can for one reason.
Cost.
Yeah.
Number two is there's 35 stations, at least 8, usually 40, 50 at some of the California stations. I don't have to worry that I'm going to pull in and be blocked, because the older Electrify Americas would have a 150, maybe 2 350s, and then that shared one they share with the Chatham.
Older? You mean the ones that we still have here?
Yeah, you probably still do.
That's what I saw a lot of.
A lot of the new ones here are they're all 350s, but I'll hit it. A Better Route Planner app is all I use to plan with. That is the only thing I plan with. We were just talking about it tonight. I've got I think it's 12 days of about a route planner routes through this California trip. And I have Tesla with 2 thumbs up in the preferred chargers and Electrify America with 1. And then I have thumbs down on Francis Energy, because I've been burned by those guys. If you've seen my videos so many times where Francis Energy just consistently lets me down. And so I won't even stop there. I'll go 20 miles out of my way if I have to hit an EA. But that's the thing that you don't notice now is past all this, when you actually are trying to get people to mass adopt, they need to pull in and it works. And Tesla and EA are plug and charge, which is great for the user that doesn't want to pay for an app or having that. They just plug it in and it charges.
Yep.
Tom, you were saying something about EA. What was your thought on that?
Oh, I was first saying that the 350 is always held by a Chevy Bolt. It can't charge higher than but I mean, I'm excited for the Alpatronic. I went and did one of the Alpatronic reviews. That one of the first stations they put was actually in town here in Orlando. So I went and covered that the day they opened it, and the charging speeds are wild there. I was getting really high speeds on the R1S. I'm pretty excited to take this over there to see it too. But yeah, I pretty much only take my EVs to Tesla for, I mean, pricing obviously comes into play. Reliability is the second one. Almost more important for me is reliability. I'm okay with paying a little more in price if I need to, but I'm not okay if I need to get to this city in a certain time for work, and the chargers are down. I've only gone to a supercharger maybe 3 times in my entire EV ownership, where like the whole station was out, or most of the station was out of commission, and those were all edge cases. One of them, a truck ran through all of them. It was really weird. But yeah, like insanely reliable. I can confidently make it from here to several states over, and just find Teslas. They're always right next to the road. They're always next to the highway. You don't have to go out of your way. They pick locations well. They have good stalls. And so, yeah, I choose them for reliability, even if it's.
That's a great point, Tom. That downtime off the highway matters on a long trip.
100%.
The trip from that Kyle took across the country with the 4 trucks, being able to whip into a Tesla station really quick, charge at those peak rates, and keep going, kept that Cybertruck nearly as the same time there as the Chevy.
Yep.
I think was it 5 minutes difference. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Exactly.
I really wish with the plug-in charge though you could get the subscription cost.
Oh my god! Don't get me started.
Everybody wants that.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
I know. I had to say it though.
Yeah, I don't even use plug and charge and never have, but my wife loves it. She'll no more than she charges the Mach-E. She just wants to plug it in and it go. No,
Yeah, we use it every single road trip and every single stop that we can use it. We use it, but really, that's just because we have to use too many networks.
So go back and drive a gas car. I have a 78 F-150 that I drove this week. I pulled into the gas station. I'm not kidding you. I didn't remember there being 8 buttons I had to click to get the gas to pump. Do you want a car wash? Are you a member? Do you want a receipt? I'm like, just pump it already.
I will say it does spoil you, the plug and charge, if you're not using the Tesla app. Is simple and it's discounted. Yes. I love it. But when I plugged into Franklin's and they had the charge point, and I had to break out my charge point app, and then there wasn't a way to swipe. So I'm like hovering my phone over the sensor trying to get it to read.
You didn't try to use the public charging app? That's what I use. If I can't use plug and charge, that's what I usually use is the public charging app. The
public charging app connect to charge point. Is that because plug and charge didn't work?
They're
on
like
that
what
one.
13 13 stations that are connected through that now.
Yeah, they'll do pretty much every. I haven't run across a station where I couldn't use plug and charge, where I couldn't use public charging. I mean, they have
interesting.
They have charge points, as low as like they have the ones in a local town here that are like 10 kilowatts, and they even have you can activate those through there too. So I would definitely check that out.
I spent so much time avoiding it that I never learned how to use the public charging app, because I would just only use Tesla pretty much after some bad EA experiences. And then when I went to Long MacArthur Ford, they didn't have the normal Ford chargers that I've seen from like Robert Hayes, where he shows them. They had these ones that were on an app called Zova. I don't know if anybody's heard of Zova. I hadn't before. And it was these older chargers, and I had to download the Zova app. I had to enter my information, and worse than that, I've gotten really used to apps where it like pre-fills in all your saved information from your phone, like it auto populates, your basic info, and it didn't. I'm sitting there typing out my name, typing out my credit card number. That one killed me, and I'm like, when's the last time I've done that? Normally, it just populates, and you might have to put in your code in the back of the card or something, right? But like that, I was like, oh my god, this is what I wanted though. I wanted to experience all these different types of chargers. So yeah, I just think it's interesting. Now with Alan, you having the ID Buzz, that thing is associated with EA. So you have to refresh me. Have they talked about Tesla Access? Are they going to do that? Is it exclusively EA? What's the story with the Buzz?
Yeah, so that's supposed to get access. When I first looked it up, it said in June, and they've since updated it to June or July. Thankfully, we don't have any big trips with that scheduled this summer. Most of our trips this summer are with the camper and the truck, with the Lightning. So I'm just, if they get it sometime this summer, I'll be happy. But obviously, it's not Tesla's utmost priority to get Volkswagen on it. But with the EA partnership, I guess. They do have a pretty seamless plug and charge for that, which is nice. And I know there's been a lot of harp on EA in the past. Every EA we've used has worked pretty phenomenally. The biggest gripe is the size. They're usually 4 stalls where we go to, and it's like, you definitely could use 8, because I've been to full ones and I've had to wait at 1, which we didn't have to wait that long.
Trailers
but
too, right? Do you pull
to.
trailers through there very often? Have you done any of that yet?
So we just got the camper. I've charged with trailers before, and there was a pull through at EA, and that worked well. But here in a couple of weeks, we're going to do our first over 200-mile camper trip. So I'll have to charge, somewhere. So we'll see if there's pull through or not. And then this
That's
summer,
why I like Tesla too, because there's usually enough that you can get to an end and not block a bunch of people. I do 80. I've done like 80,000 miles of EV charging, mostly towing, and I bet 80% of those I leave the trailer hooked up. It just doesn't. It's not a real problem, but
that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, because it costs time and you're worried that the trailer is going to get stolen or wherever. But I got to say, talking about plug and charge and doing these, what happened to the thought that we all went technical with these chargers? So I'm going to share here a picture of a charger in Oklahoma. It's at off I-44 between Tulsa and Springfield, Missouri. This charger doesn't have an app of any sort. You pull up, you swipe a credit card, you plug your truck in. Like, that's how gas stations have been forever. I don't even remember if you guys might recognize the brand of this. I don't know what it is.
Those are what Ford uses for their Ford branded chargers. Those exact units. Yeah, so it's not obviously these aren't branded that, but yeah.
No, they're not branded, and they don't have any sort of app. And they're not even on, the plug. But I pull up to these.
I believe Iona does the same, right? No app,
you
just
swipe a card and move on. And I've heard so many folks at stations that don't understand. And I try to help people when they're at an EV station, especially if they're new. How do I pay for this? How did you get all the way to here? Well, most of the time we just plug it in, it works, because they had free charging and then they run out, And so the credit score swipe, I feel like that's where every station that doesn't have that has failed. At least give me the option to swipe a credit card and start charging. I know Tesla's a little different, so I won't pick on them, but there are some.
The problem with EA is they credit card. It's true, but the problem with EA when their early rollouts is they put tap to pay on every single station, and they all broke. In the weather, so they didn't work. I mean, and that was, I think, even probably more frustrating for people, because they're trying to get it to work. They don't know that it's necessarily the reader that's the actual problem.
Martin, I tend to agree with you, though. My wife had to run up to Michigan for whatever, and she was on the way back and had to charge, and it was a network I'd never heard of. It was Red something. And they had a tap. What is it?
Red E, yeah.
And they had a tap, and she tapped and plugged and went in, and it was, super seamless and easy for somebody who's not that EV technical or whatever, and it was great. So I agree.
Red E has partnered with Ford actually and put a few in that they're Ford dealers in Michigan, not in Ohio yet, but in Michigan, and we have used them as well. They're not the fastest in our experience, but they work reliably, and like you said, they're easy to use for basically anybody who needs to use.
Well, I have noticed that not all Ford dealers are using the same charging network. The chargers might be different, the network might be different. A lot of them are 200 kilowatts, which I only see 130. It must be because it's 800 volt architecture designed, but Ford doesn't have any 800 volt systems, so I don't quite understand that. They'll rate them at a higher, but you can pull in with an EV9 or Rivian and probably see it.
Yeah, Jim talking about the EVgo auto charge, and I swear I have seen videos about the difference between auto charge and plug and charge. And I know it has something to do with a number.
It's a protocol difference. Yeah, I think they
Mac
use
ID or something. I can't keep it straight in my head.
Does EVgo use, I think, the VIN somehow? You put the VIN in somehow. There's a little bit of a difference, but yeah, it's essentially like the exact same thing. But it works well. I kind of wish they would just support plug and charge, to be honest. So that way it was just the same.
They're pretty big.
For a first-time user, you show up and you have to set that up unless you don't use Apple or Tap to Pay. So it's like
I've had it for a couple years, but there's just EVgo is not as big a network in my area as Tesla or Electrify America or even Francis Energy. I hate to give Francis Energy is huge in this Midwestern, Kansas to Texas area, and it's the app. and then the card doesn't work, and because and then a lot of people might experience this too. If you're using a bank card and not a credit card like Discover or American Express or something, and my bank sees this weird, doesn't say Francis Energy because it's back-ended through some company, and then they block the charge, and then you have no way to pay because you can't just swipe a different card. That gets very frustrating if you're trying to travel across country.
I will say, I do hope Alan takes his ID Buzz on a road trip because I would love to see it. And it gets better range than my standard range did. So I know it's possible because I've done a couple decent ones. So I want to see you do it. Like, I think that the Buzz is made for road tripping. And it's one of a handful of EVs that appeal to me. I know it's hard to, I want the dual color, right? And those are always the most expensive ones.
Yeah, they are. It's so spacious. You really can't beat it with almost any other EV. The only thing close is probably the R1S. And the charge curve on it's pretty phenomenal. I've kind of tried to point that out online to people. It's like, yeah, the range isn't quite as good, but it actually charges faster than most Teslas. So it kind of is in that middle ground. For road trips, we've started talks about a big one in 26. We'll see how that pans out. I would love to go out to the West Coast and whatnot, but I was just looking because we're big national park people. If we went, back from Yosemite to home, it was like 44 hours. And I'm like, we might do it, but it's a commitment.
Yeah. I'll be in Yosemite. I'll be in Yosemite in a month in the Lightning. And so I'm going to post this whole trip and document it. So speaking of that, I think I had mentioned to a lot of folks that we had talked about taking the Lightning, and we've been working on this generating while we're charging. So charge while we're driving. We're getting really close to having that ready to go. But I had made a commitment when I bought this last 30,000 mile Tesla because it's free supercharging for life of the car to take it. We've been on 4 road trips in it now, about 2 hours a trip, and not knocking the Tesla Model S because it is very comfortable, but it is not a Lightning. And so we have switched our mindset back. Now we're going to take the Lightning on the road trip. And I don't know about an X. I've heard the X is pretty good road trip car because it's bigger and more comfortable. But the S, the seat, and it's it's a legacy car. It's a 15. The seats are a little hard. The autopilot's okay. It's not Blue Cruise. I will give them some credit. The autopilot doesn't nag. There's nothing to look at your eyes and nag at you like the Blue Cruise can. Chris, you experienced that. Look away for 2 seconds, get a drink, and it's beeping at you. Hey, watch the road. But even then, if you are watching the road and you're doing what you're supposed to do, the Blue Cruise is pretty amazing. So all those things considered, it's a tough decision because it's going to cost me about $900 more in energy to take 4,500 miles out through, Arizona, up through California, and then back to Kansas. But it's worth it to me. That's the reason we picked the Lightning again.
I'm curious what the fellas think about Blue Cruise versus FSD. I don't know if you've both been using FSD with your Teslas, but I waited so long for Blue Cruise, and it was amazing to have it going across the country. I mean, it really changed the experience. But having been in FSD now, there is a bigger gap between Blue Cruise and FSD than there is between lane centering and Blue Cruise for me.
Absolutely.
FSD was special. And especially in the new Model Y that I experienced, that thing was really elegant and really well, more so than the Cybertruck. I have a couple points on the Cybertruck where I show some really odd behavior that I didn't see with the Y. But Blue Cruise, as great as it is, it still really was rickety around corners. Like the wheel would do this a lot. I shouldn't admit this anywhere, but there was a point when I was driving through where the freeways was being worked on. The entire other direction was closed down. So they took the direction that I was in. I think, Martin, I told you about this. I can't remember. And they had taken the highway, and one lane was going the correct way. The other was going the opposite direction because the correct side of the freeway was closed. And Blue Cruise doesn't know that it's got these cones that are separating my lane from the lane next to me. And when I hit the blinker to turn left, which it absolutely should not have done, and it's got these cones all the way, it was like preparing to change lanes.
I did that. I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys remember my Colorado trip last year. We were on Blue Cruise south of Wichita, and they merged us over with cones. And I got to be honest, I wasn't paying close enough of attention, which is horrible to say. I do now. I took out 3 of those cones before I truck, get back over. It just Blue Cruise does not detect road cones. Don't try to. It won't.
I went to document it, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to video this. This is kind of interesting. But I wanted to wait, and if I was going to be irresponsible, I wanted to be responsibly irresponsible.
Yeah.
So I was waiting until there was no traffic coming towards me at all on the other lane. Not that I was going to let it hit a cone Martin style, but I just didn't want their I didn't want to freak. I didn't want anybody to see my giant Lightning turning left into them, and freaking them out. So I waited and by the time I waited, I went to video it. And as I was starting to video it, it started to turn hard right to an off ramp. And I'm like, oh my God. So I missed. And then by the time I got that corrected, the lanes had gone back to normal again. But I'm really, so Blue Cruise still has, again, amazing technology, but not the same as FSD, in my opinion.
No.
What do you, Alan, Tom, what do you guys think on that? Have you experienced it? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I had FSD on my my last 3. And it was, I had hardware 3, so it wasn't the newest one. And with that, I'm assuming the lower camera and the lower computing power had some issues. But it was pretty good. Most recently, the hands-free version was pretty good. I use it whenever I want to eat lunch. Eat a sandwich on the highway. It's perfect. Truthfully, I'm not that big of an ADAS user in general. Most of my behind the wheel is I love driving. Like I get up and drive every morning because it's fun. Like Eddie, before I sold the Tesla, it was at nearly 90,000 miles, and I mean probably a good 90% of my miles, if not more, were manually driven. And so like I've done Blue Cruise on here a couple of times. Only had it since yesterday, but I used Blue Cruise a couple of times today. I used it driving home yesterday for the dealership, and it's pretty good. Only issue I had is there's Florida has like 50 billion toll booths. That's why we're all I could probably afford a second Lightning if we didn't have tolls. But that's but
a subscription for that.
Yeah, reaching the toll booth, it had take control, which the Rivian also does. Rivian Gyro Plus is similar. It'll see a toll or an interchange and then be like, it'll freak out like, take the hand, put the hands on the wheel. And it did that. But I mean, apart from that, it's good. It's solid. Speed control is good. I didn't have any attention monitoring issues either, so that was good. FSD, I check my mirror, which I'm supposed to do, and the screen's like, pay attention to the road. And so that was annoying, but Blue Cruise, at least currently for my few experiences, the tracking was pretty friendly. When I look in the mirror, grab my drink over here, it was pretty good. FSD is definitely better if you want to use it for the city, of course. It can drive drive anywhere. That's their model. But I mean, Blue Cruise is probably the max I need. Basic autopilot is probably the max I need on my Tesla too, but it came with it, so I had it. Otherwise, I probably would have even really noticed it anyway.
So I'm kind of with you. I like to drive too. Around town, I don't run Blue Cruise or Cruise or any of that. Even back and forth, even the short highways, I drive. I like to drive. I grew up in Lightnings and Cobras and all that stuff back in the day. But those long trips, like this 4,500 mile trip, that was part of it for me. So this fills into Derek's question here: is Blue Cruise free? Well, it is for some users for 3 years, for some users for 90 days. It depends on the model and what year.
Ford gave another year for free. Yeah, there's
all kinds of answers there. But at the end of the day, it will cost us eventually. It's not something you buy and own. But is there a basic autopilot for us? Yes, it's called lane centering. Yes, that comes with the truck, regardless of what happens for subscriptions or whatever. You do have to keep your hands on the wheel. And I can't speak for the new Tesla. It's been about 2 years since I've been in a 22 Model 3. So somebody else here might jump in, but the older ones, the Model S, we have a 15 with autopilot. You have to keep your hands on the wheel, but it doesn't nag at you very often. But you get phantom braking a lot. I noticed that in all the Model 3s I had and this Model S. So it'll just slam on the brakes, and that drives me crazy to the point where I don't even want to run cruise control at all, because if I got people behind me on the interstate and they're running too close, which people do, it scares me that I'm going to get that. I've never had that happen in the Lightning. It just, Ford's system does not do the phantom braking thing. And for me, that was a deal breaker for ever wanting to run a full self-drive or even the autopilot. I don't like that ability for the car to brake when there legitimately is nothing there.
Yeah, Alan, what'd you experience with?
Yeah, so
preparing?
I had hardware 3 vehicles as well, and that's always the comment as well. Try on hardware 4, and well, there's going to be a hardware 5 coming, and probably so this is a very difficult technology to work on, being full self-driving, and I think the hardwares are going to continue to advance over time. But for hardware 3, it was a fun thing to try, but we had some really bad experiences with passengers and other stuff with it. Where it was, if I didn't intervene, something really bad was going to happen. And it was pretty scarring, to my wife and other people in the vehicle. So as awesome as it is, and it's obviously, like you said, Chris, overall way better than Blue Cruise, can work on every road and everything else. It still has some crazy behaviors. And I talked to a lot of people who also have, latest hardware Cybertrucks and other stuff, and they say the same thing. They're like, it's really awesome. You really have to watch it because you cannot trust it. It's getting better every day, every software update. I know it gets better and better. And I think someday they will solve autonomy, but it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. But as compared to Blue Cruise, yeah, I agree that Blue Cruise is nice on the highway. I really dislike any of the nags, though. That's why I like, just give me the old Tesla autopilot without the phantom braking. You're very right, Martin. My daily commute, I drive 55 miles an hour for 25 miles, almost straight. I have like 2 turns, and the amount of phantom braking, it can drive me crazy. Still worth it. I'm not like you where it's like that's a deal breaker, but that is not enjoyable.
I'll tell you, the Cybertruck,
turn it off in a Tesla, right? You can't turn off autopilot, and how do you have cruise control in a Tesla without getting the phantom braking? Are they kind of the same system? I mean,
I think you could, if you turn autopilot off, you might be able to go back to the original, but they really want you to use their ADAS. I mean, it is in general much safer statistically. But you've got things like that you have to deal with.
Right.
The FSD oddity that I ran into was Cybertruck, 2 of them. One was right at the factory as I was pulling out of the parking lot. It had mapped the parking lot to where it thought it could turn right, but there was a red skinny barrier. And I think the size of the barrier being skinny was the problem. It turned right, and as it approached this barrier, it was clear it was not stopping. It was going to plow through that barrier. And I thought, well, this is awkward. I better stop it before I crash into the barrier at the factory. And so that was within seconds of driving it, that happened. And then the other one, which I don't know how they would, I'm curious how Tesla will ever program around this. They had a street sweeper in the fast lane of the freeway. So there was a CHP car, a street sweeper, a gap, a second street sweeper, and another CHP car. And so it recognized the first one. Like, it saw the CHP car and the street sweeper, and it signaled itself and it went around it. And then as it got past it, where that gap between the 2 street sweepers were, it tried to cut back in between the 2 street sweepers. And I don't know how it would ever have any context. Like, you can visually see as a human the 2 police officers and the 2 street sweepers, and I recognize that is not a situation that I should be sitting between.
And you're going to get a ticket if you pull in there.
Right. So I had to intervene on that one. I'm not sure how they will figure out scenarios like that. That is one of, I'm sure, a dozen different oddities that they will have to test and somehow account for.
It's so difficult. The edge cases don't end. Like I said, I think eventually they'll get there, but it's got to be just as good as a human, or it's got to be better than a human. It cannot make the mistakes humans make. Or it won't be acceptable, because it needs to be almost perfect. I don't think it'll ever be perfect, and it's a very difficult thing to solve.
Yeah, and I think if on the Blue Cruise side, I think if I could improve one thing, and there's a couple different things, but the one for me that I really would want to improve is the way that it accelerates and brakes when something is in front of it and then moves. So that's something that I experienced a lot when I was driving the long distances.
Not very smooth, is it?
It's not smooth. It's very abrupt, and it's also not. It's not good for the efficiency. No, so let's say first of all, 80 miles an hour. You guys that live in parts of the country with 80-mile-an-hour speed limits, I've never experienced that. I didn't realize an 80-mile-an-hour speed limit was a thing. So
85 in Texas.
So I had put my Blue Cruise on to 80, and I was like, this is amazing. But then you get a car. Full disclosure, I got a ticket, not for going 80. So, you're supposed to not stay in the fast lane. You're only use it for passing. So I'm sitting there with Blue Cruise in the right-hand lane. And two things would happen. One, when somebody would merge and they would get directly in front of me, and they would be like, maybe their bumper was kind of on the front edge. Their rear bumper was towards the front edge of my passenger bumper. It doesn't recognize that. And so the moment that it's not slowing down, like it's kind of in their back corner over their shoulder, and it's not letting them merge in. And so the first thing that would happen is, then it would get in front and it would hard slam on the brakes. That car would get in front. Now there would be a big gap. Then it would hard accelerate to try to get back up to 80 miles an hour. Like no normal person would do any of that.
No.
But the thing that happened to me, though, is I was just kind of letting it go its own smooth course on the right-hand lane. And there's a car in front of me, and I'm not really paying attention to what's further on beyond the car in front of me. And a cop's got someone pulled over, and then you're supposed to merge to the left to get around the cop.
Yeah.
And it doesn't know that either. So it doesn't. So I'm just like kind of in my zone going down the road in the slow lane, because I don't want to camp out in the fast lane. And I go by a cop, and a cop pulls me over for failing to move over.
I can see the headline now, Chris. Blue Cruise got me a ticket.
I felt like I was damned either way. Like if I sat in the fast lane, I was going to get a ticket. If I'm in the slow lane, and I'm going to get a ticket. And you can't always see. By the time you see the cop that's in front of you, and I'm like, why are you pulling me over? But you didn't pull the guy that was directly in front of me over, or the 150 guys that are driving by us right now, this minute, as you're giving me a ticket. So I'm waiting to see what that ticket is out in the fine folks of the State Patrol of Tennessee. But the whole rest of the time, I was paranoid, trying to leave a bigger gap between me and the vehicle in front of me, because I needed to see far enough ahead that if there was somebody pulled over, I would see it in time to turn to the left. But I was, you can adjust that distance between you and the vehicle in front. I had it at like the shortest distance, because if you left too big of a gap, people were getting in front of you, and then it was slamming on the brakes constantly. So I was just trying to find that sweet spot of how not to have cars constantly pull in front of me, which would cause Blue Cruise to slam on the brakes. If I was leaving too big of a gap, that was happening. If I was too short of a gap, I couldn't see beyond that vehicle.
Uncomfortable.
So
I noticed if people merge over in front of you on the Ford, though, we'll give them credit. If they're moving faster than you are, it won't slam on the brakes. It's only when they're moving a little bit slower, then it freezes.
I was just about to say the same thing, which is unfortunate because it's not consistent. But it's like if they're going a certain speed, it does a really good job sometimes, actually. And then if they're going slower, then all of a sudden you'll.
It doesn't.
I noticed that earlier when I was testing it. There was a car that merged from the on ramp in front of me. They were still catching up speed, and the truck was like, "Whoa!"
And it doesn't need to brake. It just needs to slightly let off and let the regen slow you down.
I mean, come on, guys. The Lightning's in their personal bubble. You just can't get in those.
But that's where. So you're right, Jace. It does handle it better if they're going the right speed. But what was happening to me is I had that like the 4-bar distance or whatever,
which is safer, right?
So it'd be safer, but then what would happen is the car would get in front of me into that gap.
Everybody uses that space.
Yeah,
I use two myself, but
I vary. It depends on the road, how much traffic. I'll find myself moving that up or down throughout the trip. Like if you get on I-44 between, say, Joplin, Missouri, and Springfield, it is chaos. 75 miles, some 80, and if you're not running 90, you're getting run over, and there better not be a gap because. I mean, people are passing on the right, going back in because the big rigs on that road that's mostly a highway for semis. And you can't run Blue Cruise on that road and feel comfortable. It's just not one you can do. And I'm curious, Chris, you came across I-40. I-40 is pretty well that way too. And I think you experienced a lot of that on I-40.
It was, the whole thing was a different experience because in California, I'm never really above 70. Like 70 is what I'm going. And there's not, you couldn't go 80 if you wanted to go 80. And most of the time I'm not even going 70.
I'm really looking forward to that then, because I never am under 80 on a road trip.
Yeah, you won't see much. I mean, maybe I-5, but even parts of I-5, you're sitting in traffic, especially as you get close to LA and different areas. They're only
Wow.
2-lane highways. Trucks are pulling out into the fast lane to pass. I mean, it was definitely a difference to drive out in that part of the country for sure.
And if you weren't trying to get home fast, you could have just went Route 66 all the way, and that would have been the good old days.
Yeah, there was a lot of things. If I had, I wish I had like maybe a week and a half to, stop a few places a little bit longer, see a few more people. Once I got to Colorado, it was clear that I'm running out of time, and I just buzzed through from Colorado to Utah and Nevada, and I didn't stop at all there. That was like 24 hours of straight driving, but it was all the stops were great, and just seeing the different parts were great. The weird to me because I'm not from a place that snows. Seeing 8-foot tall poles that mark where snow levels are, or seeing big gates that are used to block off entire highways, like these giant metal, clearly they're permanent gates to block off on ramps, and bridges that had these big railroad track looking things that would come down, and these entirely different aspects of the country that I had never. There was nothing like driving through Tennessee where the hills were just all green trees everywhere you looked, and lakes and the Rocky Mountains. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, maybe the Sierra Nevadas is like that, but it was an impressive drive across the country for sure.
How was visiting Ben's place, Chris?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. The view that he had up there, this was like how we woke up the next morning, right? I mean, and there's this windy road down there that you drive up, and it's probably the first time I ever legitimately used my truck as an actual truck, being semi off-road with dirt and the rear end kind of sliding around a little bit around some corners, and dust everywhere. There's still dirt and stuff in my truck that I don't know if I'll ever get out of there, but it's a little piece of Colorado coming back with me,
That road is wicked. I love it.
It looks beautiful.
It was cool. And this was I'll kind of show you, he's got this like Airbnb yurt luxury kind of living accommodation that I don't think I grabbed a picture of that one. I need to send myself that picture. I don't have it actually on the computer. But it was pretty awesome. He lives in a blessed place, that's for sure. But I don't know that I would want to go up that road in the snow.
He did it in a standard range rear wheel drive 3 for years, and I can't even comprehend.
Yeah, that was definitely an experience for sure. All of it was an experience, to be honest with you. I mean, when I was going through and seeing like Martin's place, I mean, and there's not many places in California where you've got like an entire barn behind you, and this is Martin's entire shop in the back here is this amazing place with a full lift with a welder. He's got a parts car Tesla sitting in the corner. It's all of it was pretty impressive to go through every stop for sure. I encourage anybody that gets to do a road trip like that to just take the time and do it, because it was. Yeah.
Somebody's coming through Kansas. Come on in. We'll see if we can force scan your truck a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would be the thing, man. You can just have like a mobile Forescan and FDRS service, and people will seek you out from the Ford community for sure.
I probably could.
Off topic, but you are coming out with that stuff, right? When you come to California, the FDRS, and yeah, cool.
If I wasn't coming for you, it would be in the truck anyway.
Yeah,
I don't go anywhere without tons of tools and all the laptops, all the adapters. I maybe that's just the way I travel, but I'll have multiple opportunities to repair the Lightning on the road if that happens. So,
yeah, the Franklin charging, this is a shot from there where they've got the charge points, and the free wire is something that's pretty cool. This place was awesome. What I really liked about them was it reminded me a lot of Josh and Jesse, who wanted to build charging, for Tennessee by Tennessee people. And and it was a lot like this, like, for Arkansas, this was, before there was IANA, before there was, places like Rove charging in Southern California. Franklin's charging was there, and it's kind of a precursor, I think, to what some of these IANAs are, where they've got, canopied charger systems and like a little snack shop area that you can go into. So yeah, I thought that was super cool. Yeah, the things along the way, just if you're into that kind of stuff, I think for me was a blast. A little controversial on this one. When I was out to visit Kyle, I did my first stop at a Buc-ee's, and this is not a great representation of what a Buc-ee's is, because this just looks like a Circle K that you pull up to. This is too small. When I needed to have done a better picture of this, but I did not enjoy Buc-ee's. Like I plugged in, I went into the Buc-ee's, and it reminded me of like a double Costco chaos. Everything had giant lines, people everywhere. There's no way I could have gotten into the Buc-ee's, done anything useful, and gotten myself out before my truck was charged. And
you have to go at like 1 a.m. That's the time to go, because it's like,
and even then, it's crazy.
It is.
Do all you guys have Buc-ee's? Are they? I think they're predominantly in the South, right?
In the South, yeah.
Yeah, we just got one that's coming to Dayton, I think-ish, Ohio, right? Is that where it is? It's like Dayton area.
I'm not sure. I've only went to ones driving to Florida and back. So
yeah, there is one opening in Ohio in the next, I believe, like 6 months to a year. But it's a good 3.5 hour drive for us. But it's the closest one by far. I mean, the other ones are 4 to 5. So
there'll be signs like 1,000 miles away saying, "Hey, Buc-ee's coming."
They just started advertising here in Northeast Ohio because of that new,
I love
new
it.
station. That's fine. Yeah.
It was something I definitely wanted to experience, but it was a spectacle for sure. But I had to take up 2 charging spots because of the way, because they were the version 3 cabinets, and it was packed. So I was already like, oh man, I feel awful being here because this place is packed. I went into the Buc-ee's and I came right back out again, and I was like, my truck will be done charging. But I'm glad I experienced it. If my kids were around, the kids would have loved to see everything that was there, but I wouldn't have left it charged. I would have unplugged it and parked in a normal spot, because I just can't envision any way to get in and out of there in 30 minutes. Like, not that I could tell,
You didn't have any brisket then, I take it?
No. I went in. I did.
That's the whole reason for going to Buc-ee's.
Yeah, I took a picture of the jerky wall, which I thought was pretty amazing. Like, the wall of jerky was pretty impressive. And I just took like a couple shots for the video that I'll eventually one day cobble together. I've got so much, somehow I'll make a coherent video out of all that. But yeah, I definitely wanted to see it, but having seen it now, I'm like, yeah, maybe unless it's 2 a.m. somewhere, I don't think that would be the place I would seek out for charging.
So there's kind of a shot of Buc-ee's in the background. It looks like a Walmart, but this is how you have to park. I actually got thrown out of this when they tried the little attendant tried to throw me out for parking across the red line. And I'm like, guys, there's plenty of room to get around. It was just ridiculous. But yeah, this is pretty typical of a Buc-ee's. Is lots of space. It's bigger than a Walmart parking lot for sure.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, this was a Saturday morning, so I'm sure that didn't help the situation. And then Colorado, man, has some weird intersections. I experienced this twice, where that Buc-ee's had it, and there was another area in Colorado that had this, where you're on the wrong side of the road, and it's like a roundabout.
It crosses over. They did a lot of research on that, Chris, and it actually flows traffic a lot better. But it feels weird when you come off the roundabout and you cross the side of the road. You're like, what is going on here?
They started doing those in Florida. It's wild.
I was gonna say, when I went to Orlando, it was, we have those in Ohio, but it was that with 100 times more cars at once. It was crazy.
I was almost paralyzed for a second. I was like, am I on the right? So where? It messed me up. Like, maybe
that's
it's
how
safer.
When you're getting old.
Yeah. No, I was definitely like, old man yells at clouds. Like, who designed this contraption? Yeah, and I think the other thing I'd love to hear from you guys who have done a lot of road tripping, because this is I was kind of playing around with the idea of more charging shorter versus longer charging, like less often, right? And I kind of
shorter.
I know. I say, Martin, you've said this. You've said this before that charging shorter is better. But here's what I ran into. So here's my thought. Like 9 out of 10 times, you're going to have a flawless charging experience. So if I only charge 7 times, there's a chance that I'm going to have 7 flawless charging experiences. But because I'm charging 12 times, I'm inevitably going to run into one that isn't. And so what happened to me is that although I was doing these shorter, quicker, like 30-minute, sub 30-minute charges sometimes, just jumping from kind of staying in the peak of my area. I was wondering, one instance, my battery, and I had never seen this before, my battery temperature was high. And I had never seen that in a Lightning.
Yeah, they do on the new ones, but it's only even when it goes up, halfway between the safe and there, it's only like 110, 112 degrees. It's not really hot.
Yeah, it was just
that in the software. The early versions, I saw 112 degrees on the car scanner app, and it was dead in the middle. Like they never used to move it, and now it lets it go up.
So maybe that's a software change with the 25. Maybe it is showing it more.
Well,
but my first thought is because I'm going
even the 23 is not when I back end loaded the 25 stuff. The 23 did that.
Well, then the other thing I ran into in one case, and I've only seen this happen one other time at a Tesla charger. I couldn't charge at a Tesla charger. It would not connect. I tried multiple ones. The light would go blue, but it would never flash. It would never actually initiate the charge. And then I had to go to an EA, but the EA was further down into the town, and then I had to connect. And then on the second one, I went to an EA, and it was funny because I had just made a video on X apologizing to EA, and I was like, EA, I owe you an apology. Like, this, and it was ripping. EA was ripping, doing great. At the very next stop at an EA, it gave me the 33 kilowatts that you get when the sensor is bad on the cable. Like something, I've seen that consistently. Like it'll go 33 kilowatts if the sensor is bad, because that's all it wants to give if it's not liquid cooled or something. Someone explained it to me once, but those 2 instances ended up taking all of the time that I allegedly was saving by doing the jumping from charger to charger. So I'm curious what you guys think about that have done it more often. This is the first time I've tried to do that, but it
depends on where you are too, though. Like what region you're in, because like for us, I mean, we don't have a ton of choices. It could sometimes be the difference between a 50 kilowatt charge point or 150, 200 kilowatt other chargers. So like, and
obviously you can't do that, right?
Exactly. So like 99% of the time, I mean, maybe 95% of the time, we're just going to 80 just because it's not that much longer for us, but because we live where we live.
Right. I mean,
yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. And I would do that. And that's what we talked about this before too, with people who had Silverados. Like I would probably charge longer with the Silverado because I would naturally want to go to 80% just because that's kind of like what gives us the most comfort, no matter even what the mileage is. I'm really kind of looking at the percent. And like we've said, there's many times where like the truck is finished before we are. So, there's sometimes where I'm just like, we're at 75%. Why not just go to 80? So that's kind of our philosophy on it, just because there's not a lot of the thing that matters the most is the location of the charger.
Well, and that's so I've had a big experience with this exact thing, and kind of the first year we went to Canada, no Tesla network, so I couldn't do that as much. And when you're towing a boat getting 1.3, it's difficult to know, okay, am I going to make it? Sometimes you're even slowing down to get there. But once the Tesla network opened up on year 2, between those 2 years is where I watched Kyle's video of the race across America, and he's charging in peak cycles, and as soon as that thing drops off, boom, he's out of there. Like the Cybertruck was just charging in peaks. The second year, same trip, except for the Tesla network was available, we saved 2 hours on my Canada trip doing that. But we were only charging maybe 15 minutes. So it'd do the peak 180, it would drop down, and as soon as we start hitting 130, we'd sit a few minutes and then we're gone as soon as we could get to that next charger. But because the Tesla network is mostly right on the thoroughfares, you're 2 minutes off. So the only time you're wasting is the time that it's getting off. And usually now, if you got to drive halfway across town, it's not worth it at all. Just keep charging.
Yeah, that's the problem that we have, is even that some of the Tesla superchargers are not well positioned. They're not right off the turnpike. Yeah. You have to go a good 5-10 minutes. And so for us, it's like, and sometimes we're going like opposite way of the highway because there's just no convenient way to get to it. So yeah, we run into that a lot with really all of the networks. EA did a pretty good job of putting them on right off the highway here, but I think that was because there were so few EAs that were being installed comparative to like California and the other big states that they chose to put them pretty close to the highway because there weren't any other chargers. Like when we bought our Mach-E in 2021, there was one EA charger that allowed us to get to Northern Michigan on the turnpike. And without that, we would have had to exit the turnpike, find some charger off the turnpike, charge, get back on the turnpike and go. And that makes it not doable for most people. No. People are just not going to do it.
It's funny because now we have so many options, right? Like, especially California, we were plug sharing the stops in California 9. You've got thousands of options along I-5 kind of thing. But I find that range is not really the thing. It's more about charge time, because you're going to be able to go, let's say if the chargers are spread out 100 miles a piece, and they're not always, but say across, I-40, if they're about 100 miles a piece, you can go 200, but you can't go 3. So you're going to be stopping. Even if you had the Lightning will do a solid 10 to 80%, 210, 220 miles every time. And you can stretch it and get down in the lowers if you want, but on an extended range. But people think it's 320 miles. Well, really, that's at 2 mile per kilowatt hour. That's 260. And on the highway at 80, you're going to get 1.7 to 1.8. And if there's wind, you're going to get 1.3 to 1.5. All those factors are there, but the charger spacing right now is getting better. But really, the only way you're going to be able to skip a charger is if you slow down and really get better economy. But I've said this hundreds of times to people. The truck puts energy back in at the charger way faster than you can take it out going down the road. So go as fast as you can, as you're comfortable with, get to that next charger, and then allow that charger to get you to the next one. I do. So Chris, I know we came a long way around here, but your question was, what do you like to do? I personally like to quick charge, get out of the truck, 15, 20 minutes, and we're back in and we're going another hour and a half and we're doing it again. I feel like at the end of the day, the road trips feel less impactful for fatigue, especially when you're running Blue Cruise. But there's also that factor of, are you trying to get there? And if you actually run the math on that, it's faster to stop more often. And I think Kyle's video proved it exactly.
It's true, too, because we had a standard range versus extended range, and we found the exact same thing. It sometimes made, depending on the amount of stops, it made more sense to take the standard range because you're charging less often in general.
Yep.
So Alan and Tom, I want to hear.
You said that you weren't agreeing, so let's hear your side of this.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to the original conversation, or not original, like the conversation that happens a lot of range. And, like you just said, everything you do reduces range. And then what Jay said is region of the country matters so much. You're coming from Kansas, if you're going across the plains, you've got only certain chargers you can choose from. We've done trips like from Ohio to Virginia Beach. There are chargers almost on average every 30 miles. So you can very much differentiate how long you go. And I'm just going to go out and say it. Nobody wants to stop every 100 miles. So, we've done Tesla road trips where if you do it that way, if you use that ample charge curve, like Out of Spec does on their races, it's miserable. You're out of the car every hour and a half max. And yeah, it saves you a little bit of time, but nobody wants to do that. So we often, like when we came back from Colorado, there's certain areas too where there's plenty of chargers, and other trips we've done where we're charging, closer to 80. And on the Tesla, that 65 to 80 is miserably slow compared to earlier in the curve. But we still did it because we didn't want to have to stop that much sooner. So, I think I'm still an advocate for more range on most EVs, even though, we just bought a VW ID Buzz that's got less range than a lot of the EVs. But I'm still going to push for, in general, especially the general public, they want more and more range so that, again, they don't have to stop every 100, maybe 150 miles. If you're really racing the clock like that, I guess you can stop more, but it just, I don't know, it can make it more of a tedious task.
I agree with you, Alan. I'm not advocating at all that we should stop more. I'm just saying from a time standpoint.
Oh, I agree with
standpoint.
Math
works that's exactly why I'm putting the generator in the bed of the Lightning so I can go 450 miles without stopping. I would like to do 3.5 to 4 hours at and on average, I can handle about 3 hours, 3.5, and my bladder says you got to pull over.
I was just about to say too, what's the bladder time? Because there have been times too where we've even stopped, and we usually eat on these stops, right? And so we have iced tea, whatever else, and then all of a sudden it's like only an hour in, and we're not ready to charge yet. We're not there yet. We might still be at 50, 60%, maybe 40, whatever, but we're not at the charge yet, but we just have to use the restroom. So we're like, well, let's try to, if we can, maybe rope in a quick stop into it. And there's been times where we simply haven't been able to, where we stopped and had to stop. They didn't have a bathroom.
Like you're saying, Jace, I don't know about you guys, but it just pisses me off when I have to stop and I'm not charging.
Yeah. At no point did I stop without charging, for sure. Now, Tom, you've done these races. What's your thought? How was it for you? And is having done that, is that how you trip or how you road trip, or no, do you do it differently?
Yeah, and it's funny because the last race I was on was the I-90 surge, and we had the 2012 Model S. Alan saw it.
It was good to see you guys.
Yeah. The charging rate, so we only would reach a peak of the whole trip. The only peak we reached in that thing was like 128. And not only that, as soon as you plug in, it hits 128, as it ramps up and immediately drops down to about 110. And we basically figured out we're not going to charge higher than like 30 or 40% because the rate drops so hard afterwards that we'll literally be sitting there for like, an hour and a half to 2 hours to get, up to 89%. So we were doing, 30%, 35% max charge stops and just going stop, about, an hour, 15 minutes in between stops. So it depends on the car. My R1S, however, has a large plus battery pack. So I think I have a software locked 120 kilowatt hours, I believe. And the gross is 141. So I get really, really good charging rates on that. So
software lock is awesome, man. If you can get a software lock,
I chose that one specifically. I originally had a regular large pack, and then that came up, and so I had to forego some options, but it was worth it for that. So I can confidently sit there. If I could go to, the bathroom or something, go grab a snack, and I've already gone from 20% to who knows 40, 50, 60. It charges so fast. So like that, I could do the peak range because it actually will still get me pretty far. The Lightning, I haven't road tripped it at all yet, so I gotta figure out how that will work.
Pretty good too. It's 10 to 80% with the new software in 39 minutes, and that's at the
and the one thing. Yeah, and the one thing you'll love about the Lightning, I'm sure you've seen this, but you'll experience it compared to other EVs, particularly Mach-E. It's better now, but Lightning is a very consistent charger. You don't need much preconditioning. You plug it in, you'll hit 170, 180 very consistently without much work. I mean, we've been up in northern Michigan at the lowest at like 17 degrees. I mean, one time we plugged in, it was like 17 degrees, and we plugged in, and I think we still hit like 157. And we were, the pack holds the heat so well that I should say you shouldn't expect that on a cold battery that you haven't been driving, and then you just plug it in and see what happens. But we had charged, only an hour and a half, 2 hours before that, and it held the heat really well. And we still were very happy to see anything above 150 with that, cold of weather.
I mean, the Lightning, anything over about 50-degree battery, that thing will crank to 170. It just does. And the Mach-E, like you mentioned, no audio in the case at all. I pulled in with a 50-degree rider and saw 80 kilowatts. We charged it last week for the first time on a warm day, preconditioned, but it didn't need it, and I saw 162 on the Mach-E. Couldn't believe it.
Oh, wow.
First time ever seen that kind of temp. The kind of speed.
And it is getting, I've heard from Ford engineers, you need to, like, I've heard them say to me, well, you need to try a 24 or 25 Mach-E. And granted, I have not done that, but I still don't believe that it would be quite as consistent as Lightning, because I've seen some crazy stuff where I just thought there's no way that we're going to get normal
the charge
speeds,
curve on the Lightning embodies the entire truck of how consistent that thing is across their lines. It's just rock solid.
Yeah. Well, guys, as we come up on our second hour, I kind of think we're going to We're gonna
Yeah.
do this a little bit backwards. Normally, when we have guests on, it like have them introduce themselves and kind of talk about where folks can find them. Both these guys have great stories, and what's weird about, I don't know if it's weird. I think maybe it's just the timing. We've talked about this, but our biggest audience is at the end of the show. So we get the more people at this time. I think maybe it's just late at night and there's nothing better to do but maybe watch us. So yeah, let's go over to Alan and then Tom and I mean, Alan's got a great story about his calendars. I'd love for you to kind of talk about where people can find them and where that started. And let's kick over to Tom and kind of hear about how he's been doing and getting connected without a spec and where he can be found. Let's start off with Alan and kind of tell us the story, man. You got the big audience is with us now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said. So I can be found on X at TezCalendar1. Technically, I'm on a couple other social medias, but I don't keep up with them super well. So the Tez calendar is a charity calendar. 9 years ago now, another guy named Mitch, he wanted to make a Tesla calendar, and he wanted to buy one, and there was none available, so he made one. And then a bunch of people online wanted to buy it, so it grew, it snowballed, and it grew. And with all the proceeds, he started donating them to climate-related charities. About 4 or 5 years in, he had some career change stuff going on. So he threw it out there, seeing if anybody would want it. And I was a fan, and I got the opportunity to take it over. So I've continued to use this as a charity calendar, use all the proceeds to go towards, again, climate-related charities. Looking at doing some other humanitarian-related charities this year as well. But those can be found on our website, tezcalendar.com. And yeah, like I said, there's a lot that can be said, but it's just the Tesla related or Tesla themed calendar. We're in our 9th year, and we have fun doing it.
And I'll just plug for you, man. He's got some amazing ornaments. One of my favorite things is he's got the F-150 Lightning, a couple different ornaments, some with like a tree tied on top, some that are in a globe. Same thing with the Cybertruck. Just some really cool stuff that are there on your shop as well, man. So great job all the way around. And I want to say what a great sport you are, because early on when I was still kind of new and I reached out and I'm like, hey, can I submit this picture of my Lightning kind of incognito with all these Teslas? And you were such a great sport about it. And so I believe I am still the only non-Tesla in a Tesla calendar. Let me know if that's still accurate or if that's changed.
I think a Rivian snuck in once, but your picture was phenomenal. It was a Tesla T, and you were the tip of the T, I believe. That was
I remember that picture. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And unless you looked at the shadows, you really couldn't tell that was a pickup truck. Just the way that the shot was. And so I'll tell you, like Emma Berg and Jim Farley, those guys, they have the calendars there. I bought them and I sent it to them and a couple others. So your calendar is definitely, or at least it was in the Ford corporate offices. I'm sure they've taken it down now because that was 24. But great calendar. Love it. I think it was just one of those cool things to see what you do with the proceeds. And so every year I support it. I buy a few Tesla Owners Club East Bay that did that Tesla T at the top of Mount Diablo. We all bought a bunch of them. Love supporting you, man, and great job with everything that you're doing.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And Tom, man, tell us your story, like how you kind of came up and got it into out of spec and where people can find you and your channel, and kind of share your story.
Yeah, I mean, since I was little, I've always wanted to get into the auto journalism industry. I loved watching reviews. Back in school, elementary school, high school, I was literally just reading articles about cars. That's all I really did in my free time. And I'm pretty much living out my dream in that way. I've been reviewing cars. I started reviewing them on Twitter, of all places. You guys remember I did a review on my first Lightning test drive a couple years ago. I test drove that 23 Lariat, or 22 Lariat, I think, actually. And my review started taking off, and in addition to my comedic posts and stuff like that, I started this year making reviews on my own channel for the first time. Took a big leap of getting behind the camera because I never really wanted to do that. And shortly after, Kyle reached out about their new vids channel, and I was like, heck yeah! We've worked with him. I've worked with him a couple times for the I-90 Surge. He asked me to go on the truck race, but I was like the night before, and I was like, I can't go. I have work tomorrow. But no, he's awesome. So I've been doing audio reviews, planning on doing a ton of Lightning content for them. But yeah, I have accounts on most platforms. I'm really only active on Twitter. And even then I just open it, check it, post, and then go back to work. I don't have notifications on. That's why sometimes I'll respond late to people. So sorry. But yeah, I'm pretty much active on there. I post YouTube videos on my channel every once in a while. I do a lot of like cinematic stuff. I do photography, trying to grow that. But yeah, it's definitely a blessing. I've had the Rivian community has been super open. The Ford community's always been just massively. I've known most of you guys since before. Since like Raptor got the 3, which was 3 years ago. And you guys have been awesome. And so it was kind of a full circle type of thing. Now I'm in my own Lightning finally. But yeah, the EV communities in general are just so good. I love that I get to work with people, like-minded people. Test calendar, I love your calendar. It's so cool. I think I forget. Didn't I submit one of my Rivian photos? I think.
I've done a couple other projects where I did a Rivian calendar and an all EV calendar, so I'm sure you've submitted some.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, what he does is awesome. I wish I had some as cool as he did. But yeah, so yeah, I'm Tom Suburbs everywhere. So Tom Suburbs on Twitter. I have a running thing where I make a Twitter account for each car I either previously owned or do own. So I made an I Am Lightning account when I got this, so that's in my little description box here. I have I Am R1S where I post about the Rivian. I chose not to do a Tesla one because there's enough Tesla accounts on there already. So and I have my main one, Tom Suburbs, where I post my reviews or a bunch of fun humor about the car industry, talking to people, and connecting. So yeah, thanks for having me on. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts about the EV part is the community part of it, and it was the highlight of my trip going across the country. I hope to get to meet you guys in person one day, but if not, we'll do it on the podcast again. So, any closing thoughts from you guys, Jason, Martin? We'll have Martin maybe take us home, and Jason, if you want to give yours.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on. It's awesome to hear the stories and what EVs bring people together. And obviously, I love Lightning, and it's so it's fun to see all of us I know love Lightning, and so it's fun to see so many people who were EV fans come back to Lightning as an option, and now that the market has changed and such. And so I just can't thank you guys enough for coming on and telling your stories. And hopefully we can get more people in Lightnings, and if not Lightnings, then whatever EV works for them. I think Patrick and Liv say it best when they say, whatever you drive, enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Take us home, Mr. Martin.
Right. Well, thank you guys, everybody. We went a little bit over tonight, but really good content. I appreciate you guys coming on and spending 2 hours of geeking out on EV talk and Lightnings and stuff. So everybody have a good evening, and we will see you next week on Tech Charged.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Yeah.